was the fifth of 7 children raised on the land, and he seemed to have a special interest in it. Someday he knew he would make his mark. Hey guys, welcome back to Pratt's Greenhouse and to the third episode of The History of Dirt. Today's episode will be called The Fall. It was a hot July 5th in the year 1842 when a baby boy named Enoch Langdon drew his first breath. William and Elizabeth could not have been more proud to add another son to their family. He was their 5th child, and with him came more responsibility. Enoch grew up fast though, as you had to in those days, and as soon as he was physically able, he was side by side with William, working the land that they depended on. Through these young years, he also learned where the best spots for the squirrels were and where to set to wait on that deer to cross his path. And he had become a pretty good shot. He knew what rocks he could climb and the ones that were too dangerous to try. Every nook and cranny was explored, crawled through, climbed up, and jumped off of. This is how he spent his days with brothers and friends. These days seemed to him as if they would last forever. But as everything does, they soon passed away, and as he grew deep into his teenage years, he, like everyone else in the Unionville area, could see great strife and division across the country. It seemed it was all anyone was talking about over at the mill, and Enoch, along with his friends, were developing strong opinions on the matter. Until on August the 9th, 1864, Enoch made the decision to leave the innocence of his youth on Rankin's Creek and meet up with brothers George and Hiram Ransbottom of Rockwood and travel to Gallipolis. Once there, they would sign up with the 173rd Ohio Infantry and prepare for war. Finally, by September the 18th, Enoch would very excitedly leave Gallipolis for the Battle of Nashville to do his part to preserve the Union. They would travel until October the 1st through good weather, making friends along the way, not knowing for sure what awaited them once arriving in Nashville. It was a bit anticlimactic though, as they were put in charge of guarding the city, later watching over prisoners of war. Enoch had never seen such conditions before, and the hatred for him was evident in the eyes of the boys he watched over. The inhumane things that he witnessed while there weighed heavy on his mind, and soon crept into his thoughts and his dreams at night. It wasn't long until the conditions finally took its toll on his health, with what was listed as disease of the hip in the special census of 1890. He knew if he could just make it back home, he would get better and could get back to work with his dad and perhaps get a place of his own. So by June the 26th, 1865, he was discharged and sent home. Once there, he did continue to heal and would marry Rebecca Paul and raise a family of their own. But he was changed. He was not the same man who left Rankins Creek all those years before. Suddenly, he had to face the fact that his health would never be the same, and with his father's passing in 1873, this left him with an incredible amount of intense physical labor in which he became increasingly unable to do. His hip plagued him day and night until by 1886 he applied for a government pension and was listed as an invalid. He was by 1890 listed as still being treated for this hip disease at the doctor's office at Russell's Place. With a lot of his dreams dashed and unable to do what needed to be done on the farm, and with his children moving on to more lucrative financial opportunities elsewhere, he would sit in his log home looking over his fields with Rebecca, watching what had been accomplished begin to deteriorate. It was there in his favorite rocker he would wonder if he had made his mark after all. So in 1893, in pain and crippled beyond repair, he somehow would make his way to a favorite spot of his as a child. Up the hollow behind his cabin, beside a very slight waterfall, he would approach a large, healthy beech tree and begin his work. It is there he would leave the initials EL 1893, cut in big enough that any passerby could make them out. He spent most of his afternoon there that day, but probably had no idea the mark he was leaving, because those initials were the key that unlocked a family's history. The years continued to roll on until 1898, when Rebecca would die. This left him alone and unable to look after himself. He moved in with his son, Marshall, and his wife, and they would care for him until he would be admitted to the state hospital in Athens. It was there, on May the 5th, 1902, Enoch Langdon would draw his last breath. He would be brought back to Russell's Place to be buried just below Grandpa Samuel and beside his wife in the Harmony Baptist Church Cemetery. It was then what was known as the William Langdon Estate began to crumble. Land that had stood under one family's name for nearly 70 years had now begun to fragment and be juggled between family members. And in Enoch's last years, rumors began to spread of parts of this land possibly coming up for sale. Those rumors made their way to Steel Trap, a little road just off McKinney Creek, where a young family named Pratt had outgrown their little farm and took great interest in the possibility of moving to Rankins Creek. It is their story we will begin to tell on the next episode of The History of Dirt. Thank you guys for watching.
This land is my land, and only my land. My father built this fence by hand with nails and wood. This land is my land, it'll never be their land. No railway track or road will run where this house stood.